Claude Opus 4.6 that was launched just yesterday, and it pushes the multimodal autonomy forward.
And Claude actually went to Mars and drove the rover. We'll talk about that.
Markets have been very strangely reacting to the cloud and AI earnings from different big tech. We'll talk about those results.
Yeah, and OpenAI released something called Frontier, which redefines enterprise agent scale and operations.
And of course, Sam Altman has been watching. So as soon as Claude made an announcement about the Claude Opus 4.6, there is GPT 5.3 Codex. That and more. Stay tuned for a quick introduction. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jaime Shadab, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So welcome back, everybody. So let's get into the quote of the week for what we picked up. So there's been a lot of earnings reports that we've seen, and there's also information that's coming out around how things are changing in terms of search. So Alphabet had their earnings report and talked about how the space as it pertains to search is changing. And this one came from Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, and his direct quote was, "Search saw more usage than ever before, with AI continuing to drive expansionary moment." So what does that really mean? So the expansionary moment is really the tell within this. And it really talks about AI as being, I'll put it this way. Everybody's talking about AI being a cost-cutting tool, everything from like how to automating work or reducing headcount, speeding up tasks. But expansionary is the key part of what he had said. And it really means something different. It's all about AI making people do more, doing more searching, obviously in their case, but it also means more exploring, more creating, more purchasing decisions, more things that relate to people doing more, getting more answers in the moment. So whether or not you're a business leader or just someone who's trying to stay ahead of the curve, this kind of reframes what the opportunity is. And again, I don't want to say, we see a lot of things that's doom and gloom, reducing headcount, people getting laid off. We talk about the markets and some of the reaction. But what he's trying to do here, in the way I think about it, is it's reframing what we think about. It's reframing the opportunities. So the idea here is that winners won't just be the companies that use AI for optimizing their business. It'll actually be the ones that use AI to increase demand, to unlock new customer behaviors, and to think about new ways to innovate. So with that in mind, you think about higher engagement, you think about more conversations, you think about more of the self-serve that AI is going to be able to bring, which is more personalized discovery, more things that I can do without needing a bigger team to run it. So again, this really brings up, how is this going to change? How is this going to expand? So the key takeaway on this is, don't measure AI just by the hours saved. You want to think about it as, what is the new things, the new actions that it's creating? Because if AI does expand usage, it expands markets. And that's where the biggest upside really lives. It's not in how we're going to save cost, but it's about what is it going to do new to drive the things that we're trying to build. So that's I can see you're kind of like thinking, how do I interpret that?
Yeah, no, I think this is a good week in which a lot of big techs were actually reporting their earnings, and I found it very interesting, right? I mean, they're basically talking about the search remaining fundamental. Of course, the modes are changing, right? The different ways in which the search are happening, and I really, like going to the Google search often. In the personal domain when searching, because now there is a seamless transition when you do the search. It starts with the overview, AI overview, and then you can seamlessly move into the AI mode, actually. So it's actually a great point that Sundar makes about search being fundamental, but changing basically the patterns. The answers remain important, ultimately. And we'll talk about that. There are some important, the rapid news actually that we will cover today related to this. But let me just move quickly into the, the big tech earnings, Jamie. So the big tech earnings. Okay, so this week we actually had a reported earnings from Microsoft for the Azure and AWS and the GCP. And overall, if you see, AWS revenue was $35.6 billion in the quarter four. It beat the expectation, and versus the expectation was $34.9 billion forecast. Actually, all three of them beat the kind of expectation. The year-over-year growth was 24%. This was important because it was fastest in 13 quarters, right? So it tells a lot about where things are heading. AWS also talked about enormous commitment to actually spend on the data centers, somewhere in the range of, like, they're talking about the hundreds of billions of dollars, right? $200 billion. Um, Now, Azure had 39% year-over-year growth, which was faster than AWS, and the total cloud revenue from Microsoft Cloud revenue is $51.5 billion for the quarter. Now, remember, Microsoft Cloud revenue is not just Azure. It includes the 365 and other things as well, right? So it includes those services also. Google Cloud, GCP, revenue was $17.7 billion. It was 48% year over year. If you look at the market reactions, and I'm not saying the market is a very, I would say, very objective about this reaction, but market reaction was that they did not accept Microsoft's earnings very well. They were also skeptical of AWS earnings, partly. They did like Google's earning. They did like Meta's earnings. And what is happening is that if you look at the stock price, kind of Microsoft's stock price almost tanked like closer to 30% in the last few months. That's a lot. And Jamie, that impacts you and I, right, particularly.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, and the Google was, I think, like a little bit down, just in line with the overall market index. AWS was also slightly down. Now, there are some important signals here. The thing is that if you look at in terms of the growth, 39% is a lot, and 39%, even though people are saying that it was a little bit slowing, it's actually 39% in the previous quarter as well. So it's just like the same growth. That's why it was considered slow. Mind-boggling, like what is happening to the baseline expectation here?
Right.
And then AWS was 24%, Google was 48%, nearly double, but the base is low. So if you look at the overall market share, Jamie, AWS is what, about 30% overall market cloud share of the cloud. Google is about 13%, 13, and Azure is about 20%. And then so roughly the three of them combine about 65% of the cloud revenue. Rest of it is like other thing, like maybe HP and Dell and Meta and ServiceNow, because they also have the cloud portion of it, right? Not necessarily just a hyperscaler offering that they have, ServiceNow and Oracle included. If you combine that and if you adjust that, if you weight the growth, I would say the best growth was actually Azure, followed by the kind of the Google's growth and the AWS growth, because you have to look at the market base that you have, right? The base that is growing from that point. So you have to weight that one. Now, that's another thing. However, there were some other doubts that also came about for the Microsoft. One was about that, okay, is Microsoft capturing enough 365 Copilot market? Because Microsoft, by the virtue of the Microsoft 365, has a huge base. Are they converting? And that's where the other news become important, that they are basically only 3.3% of Microsoft 365 users currently pay for the Copilot, which is much less conversion compared to the others. And there are some reports that, okay, the Gemini and the ChatGPT Enterprise are gaining ground and they have much better reception, etc. And I think that's also important, because I'll tell you, there was a time period, Jamie, which Copilot kind of dropped in the quality, and that momentary lapse is not forgiven, and they're still paying for it. What happened was that, I would say that but they recovered from there. The Copilot is as strong as ever now, and it's, I don't see a need for jumping to the Chat GPT to make a search what I can do in the Copilot now. But markets don't forgive, the users don't forgive that easily. So I think that carries on. It's very important for companies like Microsoft and others to make sure the quality never drops. Very important. And that's where the point about Sundar Pichai also comes. The search quality, the answer, the ability to find the answer drops, people will not forgive you.
Mm-hmm. No, that's super true. It's you have one time to make a really good impression, and it also reflects back on person's ability to use those tools. And if they have a bad experience, they're less likely to come back to it. So, to your point, yeah, I truly do love, Copilot Chat today, or M365 Copilot, depending on what you're using. It's got all the same bells and whistles. In some cases, I would say a little bit more. But we live that day to day. So you wonder, how are companies thinking about that if they were one of the first? And the other thing that you mentioned too, just going back to, overall broad markets, it always I don't want to say surprises me, but it always baffles me. You know, these companies, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Amazon, there's always these higher and higher expectations. But when you're starting from a level that's already high, and the expectations are to keep that level of growth, there's going to be some, diminishing capability just because things are already saturated and or you have such a large market. So anyway, I am no economist, but it's common sense kind of things that you think
We
about.
all are investors.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, Jamie, a little bit gloomy start of the year. 108,000 almost jobs were cut in January, which was the highest tally for the first month of the year since 2009. It is also since the Great Recession, the first time ever the least number of jobs were actually added. On top of that, in 2025, companies tied 55,000 job cuts to AI adoption, and 51,000 of those were in the tech sector. So this year is going to be important. What messages the companies are sending, how they're tying these things, because people are getting a little bit skeptical of, yeah, AI is gaining, but it's also impacting people. So it's going to be very important here.
Yeah. I look at this. Anybody who says that AI is not going to impact jobs in the immediate future is probably not telling the truth, and or not realizing it yet. So I think we're going to see like this dip and then curve up where, yes, there may be some reduction based upon AI, but then as people start to think, well, how do I then manage AI? How do I, when I say manage AI, it's managing the agents that we created. And how does that then change the way that we think about workforce itself? So that's going to create new jobs. And it kind of goes back to the quote that I said up front is it's about what is going to be made new and how do we adapt to that? Anyway, we could talk all day on economics and things, but so what's new in the world of AI? I guess after we move on from talking about micro and macroeconomics.
Yeah, Jimmy, let's see how the AI is going to the space now. Okay, so Claude helps drive on the Mars. Basically, the NASA actually sent a rover. They have a rover on the Mars, and the scientists at the Jet Propulsion Lab, they actually use the Claude to plot about 400 meters of the what you'd say is like the rover path that they traverse on the Mars. And this is very important because rovers can get into some very unfamiliar and difficult terrain very quickly. One of the last rover was basically they stuck into the sand pit, and you and I can't just go and lift it out of that. So very important, and that's where this was very important. And the first time that they use actually Claude, the Claude code basically write a code. It took all the data and camera feed, etc., and then they plotted a path, and it was successfully done. Right. So one of the key advantage of this was that not just to keep rover out of the harm way, like basically not get stuck in a sandpit or something like that, but also they see that it was able to actually cut the time half, right? That's so it really is making the impact. And this happened over like this 400-meter sounds nothing, but it's a lot on the Mars by the rover, and it happened over the 2 days. And the problem is that you can't do that in real time. It takes about 8 minutes for the signal from Mars to travel to the Earth, so it cannot happen in real time. That's why it is very important that the onboard AI can actually do some action. And that's where I think the future is, this onboard AI in the devices, in the rovers out there, able to handle things. So that's what is actually the first proof point of this.
Yeah, and I think it demonstrates that if NASA could rely on something like a Claude model or things from Anthropic, think what it could do for your business. I mean, obviously there's complexities on moving a robot or a rover that's millions of miles away. You can think about the similarities with complexity in business, models, business objectives, and the things that you want to do. So if it's good for NASA, it's probably good for your business in terms of complexity, at least being able to handle it.
True. By the way, another news from Anthropic. Anthropic refused to have ads in Claude, tying back to the news that we had earlier about OpenAI opening some of the subscriptions. It's not for all. It's just only for the Go. It's just to keep that cheaper, I would say. They are going to have ads. But Anthropic has declared, and I like this news, that basically they're saying that there is just so much sensitive and personal conversations that people do in the chatbots like Claude or ChatGPT. It's just not a good idea to put the ads, because ads can become very invasive, and it's just like nobody wants to see that information being used.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the ads do play out with OpenAI. Other rapid news, if you didn't see it already, but XAI they have what's called Grok Imagine, and that's been there for a while, but it's only been inside of the app. But what they just did recently is twofold. One, they enabled that via an API, so you're now seeing Grok Imagine videos show up in different um, different tools or different providers, so you can make images through API calls and through their platforms. But it's also within the actual Grok app. I use it on my iPhone, so I did notice this update just this week. So you can toggle between 720 and 480 p pixel. You can change the aspect ratio, and you can go up to now 10-second videos versus what it was originally, which is 6. Anyway, all that comes into what I'm about to tell you, which is the Grok Imagine Video 720 P version, at least, is in the top leaderboard spot, beating out things like VO or the VO 3.1, beating out things like Sora models. So if you haven't never heard of the Grok Imagine, you may want to take a look at it, because it is taking the leader spot. And yes, it's got voice capability that intersplices with the video. So take a look at it. It's in the leaderboard. You may like it.
You may like to create that could be questionable, so be careful with that. By the way, Snowflake's Codex, which is basically their Gen AI platform within the Snowflake platform, it will now have the OpenAI's model as well, as part of the $200 million deal that they have cut with the OpenAI. By the way, Snowflake already have something in place with Anthropic, again $200 million deal commitment to have the Anthropic models also being accessible. So basically they're saying that we will remain model agnostic, provide the access through the Snowflake platform to our customers.
Yep. And in other news with XAI, they are no longer. SpaceX actually acquired XAI this past week. Obviously, this is a deal that helps to bring the companies together. This is part of Elon Musk's, I guess, bigger business plan, aligning what AI could bring into space, which also involves robotics. We did talk about the ability to do data centers in space. This is actually the start of that. So again, I kind of chuckle a little bit if you think about a person who might have started out at Twitter then became X, then became XAI, and now they're part of SpaceX. So follow that lineage. But it's definitely a deal that's worth what was it, 1.4 trillion, something in that range.
Yep. Way to improve the market cap. By this, now this company basically becomes the world's largest private enterprise. And of course, they are heading for the IPO somewhere in the summer. So,
Yep.
All right. Amazon and OpenAI in talks for a broader partnership to bring ChatGPT models into the Amazon ecosystem. What is happening is that, Claude has been looking for partnership beyond Amazon and Google, so they got a little bit closer to Microsoft. OpenAI wants to do the same thing. They kind of lost some ground with the Apple. They were getting very close, and Google then became the default. Now they're basically going into more of the Amazon ecosystem. So very soon you may see that OpenAI models might be powering the Alexa, for example, to start with. Amazon has also done some investments recently with the OpenAI as well. So yeah, things are getting pretty close there. Okay, OpenAI. Let's continue that news, Jamie, because this is a launch from OpenAI this week, Frontier. Now, Frontier is basically OpenAI's new enterprise agent platform. And this is actually an open platform. So you're building what you're building within the OpenAI ecosystem using the OpenAI models, etc., and the tools, but you can also bring your agent from outside as well. So, it's a platform play. So as you showing here on the screen, they already have interfaces like ChatGPT Enterprise, Atlas, business application that can access your agent, OpenAI agent, or outside third-party agents, etc. And underneath this OpenAI Frontier platform, basically allows you to do the evals, the ongoing optimization. You can do the onboarding. You can do the feedback to those agents so that they continue to improve. You can provide the business context to those agents through your data and the knowledge, etc. So that's what that Frontier is. I would say it's a new and significant launch because this puts now OpenAI, for example, started with the models, they got into the tools, and this now is a jump into the platform, right? This is basically, it kind of compares and kind of overlaps with something what, for example, Azure has it, right? Microsoft has it in terms of the agent factory. Some of the capabilities also overlap with the Copilot Studio. So it basically plays in the agentic platform space. Everybody has that. Azure has that. AWS has their own. Google has their own, I believe, anti-gravity and other where you can actually build the agentic development. So this is where this competition is heating up. And this is where OpenAI wants to play because they want to see that enterprise adoption. And there are many features in this one. You can do some onboarding process for the agent, just like you onboard an employee. You can provide a feedback loop to help it improve over the time. You can provide business context, which basically goes into the application and build that. Now, right now, it's all mostly connector based. Of course, the hyperscaler and other platforms are far ahead of this, but this is a start for OpenAI. Um, Google, Microsoft, and AWS provide this with really, really strong offering. It's not gonna basically compete so easily into that space because it's just a beginning. Uh, for example, Fabric, right? Fabric has lots of data, lots of context. It already has some agentic capability. It has an IQ layer, etc. So it's going to take a lot of time for OpenAI to gain that trust from the enterprise and basically build that capabilities. But clearly, it is very clear where they want to operate. They want to get into the platforms, basically.
Yeah, and that's the way I look at it is that, yes, it's a beginning quote unquote solution set from OpenAI, and they clearly want to get more into the enterprise space, providing, the ecosystem, the platform for enterprises to build, their agents and to have that business context that, aligns with the company's data, their business outcomes and things that they want to drive. Yes, the other platform players are definitely, 12 months, 18 months, maybe 2 years ahead of them. In some cases, depending on how you define it. But I wouldn't count OpenAI out. They've made large strides in quick manner, and they'll learn quick from feedback that they get from customers. So it's yet again another entrance that OpenAI has made into expanding where they live in the business world. So, speaking of business world, let's talk about Claude. They just dropped or delivered Claude Opus 4.6 recently. This is a major upgrade, obviously, to their top tier model. I know in a previous episode, and we did a little snackable of me using Opus 4.5, which is very powerful in a model, and this is no different. It obviously pushes the capabilities that Opus 4.5 had to new heights, everything from engaged agentic coding to long context retrievals and its ability to do deep reasoning. That's par for the course. But what's also interesting is that 4.6 actually also makes strides in the knowledge worker capability. Anthropic has always been on the forefront of security aspects, and that's no different here as well. So the safety piece is something that they've made strides in this model. If we look at just some of the things that I just mentioned, like the agentic coding, obviously it's outperforming their ability for what they had in 4.5, and even outbeats just by a little bit the GPT 5.2 Codex. Yes, we're probably going to have a new Codex model soon. So we'll see where that ends up. But again, the agentic coding, top of the notch, the ability for multidisciplinary reasoning. This looks at the humanities last exam. You see, obviously, top scores from Opus, either with tools or without. Top scores there. And then I mentioned the knowledge worker. So what's interesting in this, there's new capabilities that are being rolled out for, working with Excel or its ability to work with PowerPoint and just doing knowledge worker tasks. High scores here as well. And then, when we think about how this fits in overall, yes, eye chart here, but these are all the different, metrics, whether it's the SWE bench or the multi-model, it's taken top scores. I'm not going to say in everything. You can look at some of the ones at the bottom of this where that's given either to GPT 5.2 as an example, but it has the top scores in a lot of different areas. So bottom line, why this really matters: agentic workflows are becoming real world. This is yet again another model. Enterprise reliability. When you look at the long context ability, I didn't really get into details, but this actually now has 1 million token capability in the model. So it just greater capability for what these things are able to not only remember, but then being able to actually use throughout the context window. Ability for this knowledge worker work and the advantage that it has there. So doing real work in like legal, finance, research, cybersecurity work, it's able to actually do that. From a technical perspective, I already mentioned it before, context window, massive there, and its ability to do compaction, which I haven't really talked about, but this is the automatic context summary that it puts in there. So you can actually even have longer horizon agents and the things that they do. Obviously, this leads in coding. 4.5, I would say, in my opinion, was the best anyway. This even makes that even better. It could do things like navigating large code bases and things that it could do on its own. Adaptive thinking, effort controls, as well as then just ability to do multi-agent orchestration. So all that comes together for the ability for what this model can do. So I did mention a little bit about 5.2, and we might be getting GPT 5.3. It's here. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, Jamie, I wanted to also mention one thing, the statement that you made about some of the capability, related to what you can do with this model. Those capabilities are making impacts worth billions of dollars. Because one of the things that happened this week was that the markets spooked, and the it was like basically AI is eating the software, right? AI is eating the services. So a lot of services firm, including Accenture, Cognizant, Wipro, Infosys, TCS, they lost market cap in the range of like 5 to 10% because it was seen that the Claude code and the AI tools are getting too good to write these codes. So what is the need for some of these consulting and SI firms? On the other hand, there was also, because of the Claude codes, there was some plugin that has been actually also released as part of the Claude Core work. And some of those plugins are too good at analyzing the data, like some of the work that the legal tech does, right? And even those stocks, for example, Thomson Reuters or London Stock Exchange Group and RELX, etc., they were also impacted because that could impact their market. So these small features have the huge potential actually to impact the entire industry. Although Jensen Huang talk about, it's not gonna, it's all a little bit hype and all those things. It's not. He's been like underplaying these things a little bit. But anyway, moving to the GPT 5.3 Codex, of course, Sam Altman immediately dropped this GPT 5.3 Codex. So they were ready as soon as this happened. They launched this one. And this is actually, of course, the coding agent, right? So this is for their best agentic coding model so far. They claim that, it is 25% faster for the Codex users. It is, of course, better in terms of, what they have so far available. On the slide, you can see some of those comparative benchmarks between the 5.3 Codex and the 5.2 Codex. It's pretty good. It's in some of the benchmarks, it is significantly better. In some of them, and marginally better, but it is pretty good. But one of the things is that OpenAI did not compare that with the other. All the comparison, all the benchmark that they provided was only comparing 5.2. Of course, they did not have the 4.6 available, but they did not also compare with the other like Claude Code models and some of the Claude Opus 4.5, etc. models, etc. They did not compare that. It was remarkably in-house comparison only. But I think it was more of a kind of a show just to keep the limelight a little bit diluted from the other, like Claude, taking away all the limelight. I think it was more targeted towards that rather than being a very significant change.
Yeah, and go back to all of these frontier firms are going to be putting out models. It always seems like they're within 3 to 6 months of each other. In some cases, they're within 3 to 6 days of coming out with new models to keep parity with the other firms. So
more like 3 to 6 hours, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was about to say. As I was saying, 3 to 6 days, it's really 3 to 6 hours, and I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out to be 3 to 6 minutes at some point. But the main point here is that take a step back from who's releasing what. It's about what is being enabled by these models and the increasing push forward on capabilities. I remember it wasn't that long ago, maybe about 6 months ago, where the talk was, has AI reached a plateau? We're obviously seeing that that's not the case. Things are actually exponentially moving forward, and we're doubling in capabilities at a rate now that who knows where we're going to be in another year from now. But maybe that's AGI, who knows? But that's the point, is that things are constantly moving forward, and we're always getting advancements.
Yeah, I think another important point here is, Jamie, is this is basically not code generator. It is like a general computer worker, right? So that is one of the main important thing, that these models are not just limited to code generation. They can actually do software engineering activities. That's why they are being touted as the computer worker. That's one important thing. The other thing is that GPT 5.3 Codex and even the Claude code, when that was also announced, both of them are being positioned as that it wrote itself, because they use the same models to write these applications, right? To create these agents. So basically, they have started to create themselves. And in some of the posts from the Claude or as well as the OpenAI, etc., the engineers are touting that, okay, I didn't write a single line of code. Even Sam Altman talked about it. I didn't write. It's just scary to see that my role is changing, but the role is evolving, right? So now it's not just a code generation. It is basically now you're playing a broader role, and the models are also playing broader role.
Yeah, and it feeds into itself. It's this constant iteration and improvement. So the models learn from themselves in the past occurrences. So with that future look, I think we're at a wrap for today.
Stay tuned, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Have a good weekend. Bye, Jamie.